the majority that I can in one little sitting. Okay, perfect. Okay, should we give it maybe a minute? I see some of you are connecting to audio.
Yeah, I think once you see that the participants are connected to their audio, you are welcome to get rolling, Rachel.
All right, we will start it up. So last week we kind of talked about this idea of whether or not you were an optimist. And I know that we have that Google Doc or that Bujo or that note or that sticky or whatever kind of laying this out for us. And we talked about the idea of being an optimist versus being a pessimist, and then the ways that we can work on optimism because it ultimately kind of helps us lead a better and happier life. So remember, we kind of looked at these famous pessimists and these famous optimists. And so think about in your head, again, whether or not you think that you are a pessimist or an optimist. Get that piece of paper out or that Post-it or that Google Doc. We're going to refer back to that today. And I want to talk about a little bit today how to get out of the negative. So I often get stuck in the negative. I've already shared with you that I'm somebody who ruminates. I think about something. I think about every single which way I can of it, and it's never positive. I'm always thinking of the negatives. And my husband is always saying to me, why do you do that? And I'm saying, because I don't want to be surprised. But I don't think about the positives always. So we're going to watch a couple minutes of this TED Talk video. Let me make sure I share my sound. Okay. And if it's too loud, just stick it in the chat. Tell me it's too loud, or if it's too quiet, let me know. I think it should be okay though.
Hi everyone. Gosh, I wish I could dance, but I can't and you really don't want me to. So instead, I thought I would talk a little today about how people think. I'm fascinated by this question. I'm a social psychologist, which basically means I'm a professional people watcher. So this is what I do. I try to figure out how humans think and how we might be able to think better. And here's something I noticed a few years ago about how I seem to think. Here's a typical week in my life, which usually seems to revolve entirely around publishing papers. So here I am in the maximum of my artistic abilities as a stick figure, going along at baseline, and a paper gets accepted. I get this rush, this blip of happiness, and then I'm back to baseline by about lunchtime. A few days later, a paper might get rejected, and that feels pretty awful. And I wait for that blip to end, but somehow I just can't stop thinking about it. And here's the craziest part. Even if another paper gets accepted the next day, well, that's nice, but somehow I can't get that pesky rejection out of my head. So what is going on here? Why does a failure seem to stick in our minds so much longer than a success? Well, together with my colleague Amber Boydston in the political science department, I started thinking about this question of, do our minds get stuck in the negatives? We all know intuitively that there are different ways of thinking about things. The same glass, the saying goes, can be seen as half full or half empty. And there's a lot of research in the social sciences showing that depending on how you describe the glass to people, as half full or half empty, it changes how they feel about it. So if you describe the glass as half full, this is called a gain frame because you're focusing on what's gained, then people like it. But if you describe the same glass as half empty, a loss frame, then people don't like it. But we wondered, what happens when you try to switch from thinking about it one way to thinking about it another way? Can people shift back and forth, or do they get stuck in one way of thinking about it? Does one of these labels, in other words, tend to stick more in the mind? Well, to investigate this question, we conducted a simple experiment. We told participants in our experiment about a new surgical procedure, and we randomly assigned them to one of two conditions. For participants in the first condition, the first group, we described the surgical procedure in terms of gains. We said it had a 70% success rate. And for participants in the second group, we described the procedure in terms of losses. We said it had a 30% failure rate. So it's the exact same procedure. We're just focusing people's attention on the part of the glass that's full or or the part of the glass that's empty. Perhaps unsurprisingly, people like the procedure when it's described as having a 70% success rate, and they don't like it when it's described as having a 30% failure rate. But then we added a twist. We told participants in the first group, you could think of this as a 30% failure rate. And now they don't like it anymore. They've changed their minds. And we told participants in the second group, you could think of this as a 70% success rate, but unlike the first group, they stuck with their initial opinion. They seemed to be stuck in the initial loss frame that they saw at the beginning of the study. We conducted another experiment. This time we told participants about the current governor of an important state who was running for re-election against his opponent. We again had two groups of participants, and we described the current governor's track record to them in one of two ways. We said that when the current governor took office, statewide budget cuts were expected to affect about 10,000 jobs. And then half the participants read that under the current governor's leadership, 40% of these jobs had been saved. And they like the current governor. They think he's doing a great job. The rest of the participants read that under the current governor's leadership, 60% of these jobs had been lost. And they don't like the current governor. They think he's doing a terrible job. But then, once more, we added a twist. For participants in the first group, we reframed the information in terms of losses. And now they didn't like the current governor anymore. And for participants in the second group, we reframed the information in terms of gains. But just like in the first study, this didn't seem to matter. People in this group still didn't like the current governor. So notice what this means. Once the loss frame gets in there, it sticks. People can't go back to thinking about jobs saved once they've thought about jobs lost. So in both of these scenarios, actually, the current governor gets ousted in favor of his opponent. Well, at this point, we were getting curious. Why does this happen? Could it be that it's actually mentally harder for people to convert from losses to gains than it is for them to go from gains to losses? So we conducted a third study to test how easily people could convert from one frame to another. This time, we told participants, imagine there's been an outbreak of an unusual disease and 600 lives are at stake. And we asked participants in one group, if 100 lives are saved, how many will be lost? And we asked participants in the other group, if 100 lives are lost, how many will be saved? So everyone just has to calculate 600 minus 100 and come up with the answer of 500. But whereas people in one group have to convert from gains to losses in order to do that, people in the second group have to convert from losses to gains. We timed how long it took them to solve this simple math problem. And what we found was that when people had to convert from gains to losses, they could solve the problem quite quickly. It took them about 7 seconds on average. But when they had to convert from losses to gains, well, now it took them far longer, almost 11 seconds. So this suggests that once we think about something as a loss, that way of thinking about it tends to stick in our heads and to resist our attempts to change it.
Okay, so the idea of framing is very interesting. And I know that we had a little bit of information in the chat, but yes, I do think that is why media sometimes puts the negative number out there first, because it is something that sticks with us longer, right? If you hear that first, you're not going to hear the positivity of it. So framing is really important when you're thinking about being stuck, in the negative. So how do we combat that? So we have to kind of reframe and retrain our brain. So to become an optimist, there are 10 steps. And I don't think that you need to, religiously be looking at all of these steps. But what you can do is kind of look at these. We'll go over each of these together. And then I want you to see if there's anything that you can really pull from and something that you can use in your everyday life to kind of build that optimism and then ultimately happiness, right? The positive psychology. So the ABCDE model, which we will look at. This one, which is one that I really have trouble with, but focus on what you can control. Find positives every day and schedule self-care. I hope that everybody's been doing that during this pandemic. Stay in the present. That's another one I feel so hard. It's so hard for me to do. I can only do it if I'm in that like flow state that we talked about last time. So like if I'm exercising or reading, I'll lose track of time. Keep up routines and set them intrinsically. So goals that you can help stay motivated for, connect with others. That's really important. This one I think is very important for all of you as college students. Eat, sleep, and exercise well. I'm guessing that most of you are eating. I'm guessing that most of you are doing some sort of exercise, but sleep. I know that some of you are staying up until 4 a.m. because you've forgotten to do something before the day before. But sleep is so important. And I also used to never sleep as a college student. And now as a grown woman, I love a 9:30 bedtime. I love an early morning. Marky is not the same. Marky's a night owl. But I'm just a straight up baby who needs a lot of sleep. Journaling and writing is very helpful. Acknowledge emotions. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then monitoring your check engine light, which I know is a little corny sounding, but if we all want to be as happy as Olaf, that's something we can look at. So the ABCDE model, it's an easy one to remember. So what you're going to look at first, if you're tackling a problem, is looking at adversity, or what is the activating event? So what is the challenge? What are you against? How are you feeling? Acknowledge it, right? Put it out there. Belief, what is your underlying fear? What are you afraid of? What's going to happen if you come into contact with this challenge, if you meet it head on, okay? The consequences, what feelings and behaviors do you experience as a result of holding on to these beliefs and fears? What will the consequences be? You're going to dispute it. So challenge these irrational beliefs. I think one thing that you hear often, and maybe you haven't heard this, maybe this is just something that's from Marky and my generation, but you think about the negative things you say to yourself. Would you ever say those to your friend? And you have to think about treating yourself as a friend, disputing what you're saying to yourself. You would never say that to your friend. Treat yourself as your friend. And then effect and energize. How are you feeling now? So look at it. And I know that this sounds corny, and I'm sure that you don't sit down and you're like, okay, A, B, C, D, E. But I think it is something that is really helpful if you can look at that. And for me specifically, I need to work on consequences and disputing it, because I think about the what if, and not necessarily what's gonna, what the positive outcome would be. And I think the worst, it's so silly. Even if somebody messages me and says, can you chat? I'll be like, what? So dispute it. Why am I being irrational? Okay. So here's kind of an example. So this is if you didn't get a job interview or didn't get the job after an interview, which we'll all experience one day unless you're the luckiest person alive. Okay. So the adversity is I didn't get the job after the interview. Beliefs, oh no, no one will hire me. I'm awful. I've wasted my time. I should just give up. Eat potato chips on my mom's couch. Just kidding. The consequences are, emotions, anxiety, sadness, the behaviors. Maybe you cut yourself off from your roommates. Maybe you played a lot of video games. Maybe you stop applying for jobs. And then you have to dispute it. Wait a second. It's just one job. I can ask for feedback. I can redo my resume. I can, do practice interviews. And then energize. Okay. Feel more confident. Acknowledge the pessimism and continue on your journey of success. Okay. So this is a hard one for me. I don't know about for you, but focusing on what you can control is a really tough one for me. So I want you to think of things you can control. And this is a little thing that I used to have up in my classroom. And it's things I can control. There's only a small couple ones of things. And then the pink is things I can't control. And the things you can't control are going to engulf the things that you can control, right? So you can't have a sense of helplessness. You need to change it. You need to frame it in a different way. So an example of this, and especially for me now, and especially during the pandemic, to be very transparent with you, I watched news every single day at the beginning of the pandemic, and I would cry every day. I would be so sad. I would be crying every day, even at happy stories, just because I was an emotional wreck. And so one thing that I would do is minimize my media exposure. Instead of like watching sappy stories or like watching people take their last COVID breaths, I would read facts. That's what I would be focusing on. I'd watch like BBC instead, since it wasn't, here in the US. And then you can also kind of set your goals and choose what you're looking for. Okay. So things that you can control. Find positive. So this is an easy one, and I'm sure you can do this, but I'm not sure everybody practices it. And I also do not practice this every day, but I think about, what am I grateful for that day? What am I thankful for that day? What am I happy to do? I do those activities that are in that flow. Can I exercise? Can I read for pleasure? Can I watch Real Housewives? Because I love it. So you got to find those positives and then schedule that time for self-care for yourself, to really take care of yourself. I realize that if I exercise in the morning, I am so much better the rest of the day. Like, it just puts me in a totally different mood. I also love to walk my dog in the morning. It's just like a little time of solace, the two of us. And I think that if you can find one thing to do for yourself each day, that would be really great. Okay. Stay in the present. This is a hard one for me as well. A lot of these are hard for me. I'm sorry that I keep saying this one's hard. This one's hard. I think these are hard for everyone. I think a lot about the future. I'm always thinking about future, future, future. If something happened that I don't like, I'm thinking past, 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 right? But you want to try to stay in the present. So that's where that flow kind of comes in. Take everything one time at a day. And I think that you probably feel like this with homework. I feel like this with homework. If I'm looking like ahead in my syllabus, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, there is way too much like on my peripheral. Okay, what's due next week? Okay, that's what I'm going to focus on. Engage in mindfulness or meditation. Whether you do like a 6-minute yoga with Adriene, video, or, you use a meditation app, or you literally just close your eyes in your bed for 10 minutes and you listen to, your favorite music. If you can just take that time for yourself, I think that that's good. These are some other things to kind of relieve stress. So take breaths, in and out. I'm sure that you've heard of that. The sensory input is something that's very interesting. So utilizing your senses almost in like a preschool way, because you don't often take the time to do it. So, pet a dog, pet a cat, see how soft they are. Even they say rubbing your earlobes. I hope some of you are rubbing your earlobes right now with your cameras off. That would be very funny, because your earlobes are like a very soft part of your body, right? Eating something that you can really enjoy. Like if you eat a piece of chocolate, take like a moment, close your eyes and think about it. And then also like a calming technique I know is closed sight, where you kind of close your eyes and you think about what is in the room without looking at it, because you can only think about that, right? It's the challenge you've given yourself. That one is good for falling asleep, I think, too. Keep up routines and set intrinsically motivated goals. So routine is so helpful, and especially in college when you guys are, like setting your own routines. It's hard, right? And it's hard to set your own goals, and that's something that comes over time. But remember, stay in the present, take one day at a time. Oh, do I have the same thing on here? Oh, sorry, guys. All right. Connect with others. So when you're stressed, it can be very tempting to withdraw from friends or family. And this, I think, happens to me as well. If I'm having a tough time, I don't necessarily want to talk about it. And so you don't need to talk about it, but maybe just engage with them about maybe not that, something else. Support your relationships, send somebody a text. They'll do the same back to you, and then kind of expand that social network. If something, this is about kind of looking for a job, but like if you were looking for a job, expand that network, meet people, network with people, okay? This one is important. I have all my little Pokemon on here, but eat, sleep, and exercise well. is it Machamp, Snorlax, and it has the word lick in it. I know this one. If you know it, please drop it in the chat. Licky something. So exercise has been shown to have a positive impact on mood, health, and well-being. We know this, right? This is old research. Licky tongue. Yes, thank you, Alex. So you don't necessarily need to be running, a 5K every day or, a marathon. But I want you to think about something that you can do for yourself. Literally, if you're like, okay, I'm going to do 10 burpees and like a minute long of mountain climbers, and I'm going to do it, I'm sitting at my computer on my butt all day. Maybe I do that, at the top of the hour, every hour. So think about something that you can kind of add in. And then eat and sleep well. You guys are lucky. Marky and I can just speak for myself. My metabolism has caught up with me. I cannot eat mozzarella sticks the way that I used to. I literally was telling Marky earlier, I said, oh, I ate a lot of cheese this weekend and I'm feeling cheesy. So make sure that you're eating those things that are good for your body. You want to replenish it. You want to feed it food that's going to make it work. Maybe avoid caffeine in the afternoon or the evening if possible, as Marky's drinking her coffee right now. But I'm also a Monster drinker. I drink a Monster every morning. Everybody in undergraduate admissions, teased me and told me that I was trashy because I love Monster. I drink a Monster every morning. It is not healthy. So I'm trying to cut back on my Monster, but cut back on those things. And then also make your bedroom dark and quiet and soothing. So when you fall asleep, you can, fall asleep. Okay, journaling and writing. So I know that I've talked about the Bujo. I'm all about the Bujo. Oh, I'm trying to show you my Bujo. This is my January Bujo. My word is action this year. So be emotional, express it, even if it's only to yourself. That's so important. It's horrible to keep things bottled up, right? And that adds to that pessimism. You want to, get it out, even if it isn't a journal. So you can write down what happened in your day. You can write future framing down. This one is a little interesting, but you could write a eulogy. Like, what would you want to be said about your future ideal self? I think you can also just write a letter to your future self. You don't have to pretend you're dead. That's not my favorite. And then this is an interesting one too. So step back and ask why. So you can write about a difficult time and experience and kind of write down why you think it happened. Also, gratitude journaling. Think about things that you feel gratitude for and write these things down. It doesn't have to be all the pessimistic thoughts. It can also be optimistic thoughts in here, but sometimes it's good just to let it out if you don't want to share it necessarily with anybody else. And then this one I think is so important for this because I know that we've been talking a lot about optimism, but it's very important to acknowledge stress and painful emotions. I don't, expect everybody to be walking around with a smile plastered on their face the entire day and not to pretend that nothing negative has ever happened. I'm sure that we have all experienced loss. I'm sure that we have all experienced hurt or pain. And you should acknowledge that. Not acknowledging it is what would be tough, and grief will catch up with you. And you can have grief over losing a job. You could have grief over losing a friend, an animal, or even, losing like an election or, your club not being able to be started or something like that. So you really need to look at the experience and address the emotions. Say, I was fearful, I was anxious, I was sad, I was lonely, I was in shock. And remember, there's no right or wrong way to grieve, but just know that the more that you push away grieving, it will catch up with you, whether it's 30 years later or, that day. Everybody needs to grieve. So think about those difficult emotions. It's okay if you are overwhelmed. And you can also recognize positive emotions as well. Yes. I just read that, and yes. Okay, last but not least, you got to monitor that check engine light. I know that this is kind of a silly one, but look at yourself, okay? If you haven't showered in 4 days, you're not monitoring your check engine light, right? And I know that probably happens to a lot of us during this pandemic. I can say that I've gone like a weekend and been like, oh my God, and my husband's like, you stink. And I'm like, oh, I know. I've just been wearing the same pajamas every day during this winter break. I'm disgusting. So sorry, that was way too much information for everyone. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're depressed, if you're angry, check in with yourself, tell somebody, okay? And you know, these pieces, we've got the Health and Wellness Center, we've got crisis services, any of these things, but make sure to kind of just check in with yourself, see if you're okay, right? Make time for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back to this step. We've gone through all of them. We have like a couple minutes left. I just want you to take one. And I'm sorry, this also is very lecture-y. The next class, we will have all you. It's going to be you writing, you being creative. Look at these steps in the model of positive psychology in becoming an optimist. Look at one. I want you to kind of circle it. I want you to write it on that sheet, something that you're going to focus on this semester for yourself or this year for yourself, okay? So are you going to focus more on what you can control? Are you going to ensure that you are eating broccoli and spinach at least twice a week? Make a little goal. I want you to put it down there, put it on that sheet, put it in your Bujo, put it in your Google Doc, and think about, of course, I want you to kind of tap into all of these, but think about one thing that you can really commit to and one thing that you can really focus on to reframe your brain and the thoughts that are coming out of it in a more optimistic way. And then, be able to carry that with you for the rest of your college experience. And mentors, this is a good one for you too. And yes, feel free to drop it. I specifically this year, I know that I'm much better exercising. So I'm going to have an exercise goal to try to do 5 days a week, which I used to do. And then I just started eating 5 cheeses a day instead. I'm going to try to get off of that. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Marky. I do that too. Okay, as you guys are dropping them in, I want to give the floor back to Marky so she can make announcements. Oh, you're muted, Marky.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, friends. I do have a few announcement slides for you, and then we'll finish up for the day. Thank you again to Rachel for a wonderful, lecture about positive psych. Remember, come back next week. That will be kind of the culmination of this discussion about positive psychology, and that one is going to be all you in terms of setting your plans for the future to engage with optimism. In terms of reminders and upcoming events, we've got a few exciting things going on. First and foremost, I want to remind you that we are currently accepting applications for first-year mentors for next school year. And so if this has been impactful for you, or if you just want to make a difference in the Illinois Tech community by being there for first-year students when they start their first year of school, please consider applying to become a mentor. The application is due on February 19th, and I will drop the link in the chat here momentarily. Something else that I want to chat with you about is there is a student organization on campus called Unite, and it's all about spreading awareness for empathy and understanding on campus. So if that sounds like something you'd like to be involved with, I do have a link to an interest form that I'll share here in a moment. And we also have some exciting things going on for Black History Month on campus. And I'm going to have Rachel share the link where you can access all of that programming in the chat if you don't mind, Rachel. And so here is the application link for the first year mentor mentor application. I'm going to drop this in the chat for you. As I said, this one is due February 19th, so you definitely still have some time. Pardon me. There we go. So if you're interested, please apply for this. In addition, I'm going to go ahead and pop forward. The organization that I was talking about, Unite, if you're wondering what that is all about, it's actually unifying and nurturing individuals through empathy. It is a student-led organization on campus that's dedicated to building community. And so these are some of the things that they do: collaborative discussions, interactive seminars, producing blogs, podcasts, and other forms of media. And so if that sounds like something that you're interested in, I'm also going to drop their interest form in the chat, and you are welcome to submit so that you can get started with that as well. And of course, my computer is taking just a moment to open the chat box for me. And then, friends, the last thing that we have is this awesome calendar of events for Black History Month. And as you can see, most days this month, there are different things going on, just from listening to podcasts and talks all the way to different virtual gatherings and seminars. And so if you are interested in learning a little bit more about Black History Month and culture, then you are certainly welcome to join any of these things. Rachel, I know that you have a link to the calendar, and if you haven't already dropped it in the chat, if you can, that would be great.
Yeah, I will drop it one more time. And this is a Google Calendar, so it's the OCL calendar. So all OCL events will be on here. So if you add this to your Google Calendar, you will have all the information, which please add it to your calendar so you've got all the information. I know it's hard to find everything always.
And then finally, my chat box popped up. So here is the link to the interest form if you are interested in joining Unite, the student organization. So lots of cool things for you to consider there. And then, as I said, next week, once again, I'm asking that you bring a friend to the first year seminar. This is going to be our last lecture about positive psych. And this is really the one where you are going to be taking the reins and putting into practice everything that we've been talking about these last few weeks. And remember that ultimately the goal is to be able to move us toward each of you creating an individualized college experience plan for yourselves, where you are actually creating SMART goals, specific, measurable, and attainable goals for your college experience for the next 4 years. And our hope is that you revisit this throughout the next few years and you allow it to evolve, you make changes to it, and you really take control of creating this path for yourself through college. So there's going to be more information coming on that. It's going to be something that you'll be able to do with your first year mentor during your individual check-ins this semester. And so next time, my friends, as I said, and I apologize that I forgot to change the date on this, join us for our next talk on positive psychology, where you, as I said, will be taking the reins. And if you have any questions, concerns at all, don't hesitate to contact me. My email address is mrhodes1@iit.edu, and I'm always here to help. So thanks to everyone for coming today. We will see you next week. Happy Tuesday to you. Bye, everyone.